I am going to give a screencast video lecture on the technical report as you are all engaging in revising your drafts and submitting the final one at the end of this module week. So as I said in one of my recent announcements, one of your classmates was generous enough to offer her technical report draft as something I can look at while I'm talking about kind of revisionary practices as you're doing the year revision. So first I wanted to just go over what the criteria are for the final technical report, which are these things up here. I just pulled them from Canvas. The first is to utilize the formal report format from Thibault and Draga. They're the authors of our textbook, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second. So in the draft, you were asked to use 3 sources. Now you're being asked in the final to bring in 6 sources. Provide a clear and strong recommendation for or against the use of your selected tool or technology, and you should be at least 1,500 words. So you want to be at 1,500 words, and what that includes is just the technical report itself. It doesn't include the cover page. Anything that's not the actual technical report, it does not get included in that 1,500 words. That includes the references page. So in terms of the formal report format, I have what Thibault and Draga they give this list at the beginning of their description of what the formal report is, which is on page 183 of our textbook. And I find it, and they even say like a formal report is longer than 10 pages, which are types of reports you might have found when you were doing the looking for a technical report example and then analyzing it. So what I've done is I've pulled their list here of what constitutes, according to them, a formal report, and I'm going to kind of talk about how do we modify that formal report for the technical report for this class? Because there's a lot of things in here, right? And a lot of things that aren't relevant to what we're doing. So, Thibault and Draga have got this separated into 3 different major sections: the prefatory elements, abstracts and summary, and a discussion or body of the report. So what I have highlighted in yellow are the items from Thibault and Draga's formal report format that are specific to you. So just because you're not crafting like a full-on executive report that's really long, you don't need all of these various like table of contents, list of illustration, a glossary, and list of symbols. Like, you don't need those things, and you don't have to worry about it. So the things I did highlight, and then I also, what I do down here, I'm going to bold this, is, sorry about that, I am trying to give an example of what might work for most people, if not everyone, as here's kind of a model you want to work with. And then I also try to do this in my feedback on your drafts. So was trying to help you with kind of organization and what you need. And what's good is that you guys aren't doing these things. So I don't want you to try to do them because I don't even know what a submission page would look like. I think it would be very specific to an organization, or, it's a very specific thing that we don't have to worry about. So in terms of what I put down here as a how do we modify Thibault and Draga's formal report, because we want to use what they have, but then we want to use what they have that are specific to the technical report assignment in this class. So the APA cover page, right, that works as your title page. So you want to make sure you have that, because we're also writing in using APA as our kind of format. It's kind of weird because we're using these two formats. We're using APA, but then we're also using the quote unquote formal report format. The abstract page comes after the cover page. So you also want to make sure that you have an abstract, right? And that's also something from the formal report. Now they have this split into three things: an informative, descriptive, and executive abstract. I highlighted informative and descriptive because I don't understand how those are different. So I imagine the descriptive abstract is slightly longer than the informative abstract, and it might be specific to a particular type of technical report. But yours should be a mixture of those things, and that's what I wrote here, right? It should be a mixture of informative and descriptive. And the abstract, right, abstracts are actually really hard to write. I've given workshops on how to write abstracts, but they shouldn't be excessively long. If you're hitting at about 200 words, you're kind of getting to where you want to stop. But it's really, the major objective, what it's kind of like an introduction, but not quite. But it isn't totally unsimilar or dissimilar to an introduction. But you should focus on, it's just like when you are doing research in library databases and you might come across an article that has an abstract, which is a really nice thing. The abstract lets you know what you can expect to find being argued for in that particular article, right? So that's what you want your abstract to do, right? You want your abstract to give the reader a sense of this is exactly what's going to be covered in and argued for in this particular technical report. So it's not a place where you include a lot of broader ideas that might be in the actual technical report body. It's just very specific to what's in the report, and that's it. So it doesn't need to be exceptionally long. And then after that, you go into the technical report itself. And I have memo of transmittal highlighted up here because when you use that little memo formatting before you write your technical report, that serves for this, right? So when you give the to, right, and from, and distribution list, and all of that, date, that type of stuff, that is this kind of criterion. So what I did is I tried to break this down into, this is what your organization for your technical report might look like. Everybody should start with an introduction. So you have to have an introduction. It doesn't make sense not to have one. So, and your introduction should cover, what is the purpose of your report, overview of what the recipient can expect to find in the report, and then it should include some type of thesis, right, which is your final recommendation. So if you think about, just like in any type of research paper, the thesis is the ultimate argument in the paper. So if, that encompasses the ultimate purpose. So, right, the purpose of this is to argue, right, or provide a clear and strong recommendation for or against the use of the tool or technology. So your thesis then would be a statement of that. Whether you're recommending it, why or why not. So that needs to be included in your introduction as well. What comes after your introduction in terms of sections, and that's another thing that you want to make sure you're doing in your technical report, is formatting it with sections. So sections help readability, and that was a note that I made a lot. I talked a lot about readability in the feedback that I provided, but I'm trying to get across. I was trying to get across a lot that this is being, imagine this is being read. You're submitting this to the owner of the hypothetical company that you're writing this report for to recommend or not recommend your selected tool or technology. This person is super busy. They need a certain amount of information, but they don't need a whole lot of information. You want it to be skimmable, or what we call parsable. So it all has to be it's a very direct type of writing. So this, what in terms of what comes after the introduction, that's going to be dependent upon your particular technical report and your topic, because what you're writing for might require something different. And when I look at Kristen's technical report, who is your classmate who allowed me to use her technical report as an example, what I recommend for Kristen to do in terms of sections and subsections probably wouldn't apply to anybody else, right? So it's very specific to her topic. So I have like the benefits of, the tool or technology, right? Or something along those lines, which would be a normal section to have. But again, this kind of amorphous part of the technical report is going to be very contingent upon your specific tool or technology. Everybody should probably have a cost section, just because in terms of your readership who's reading this, they're going to want to know what the projected investment in this tool or technology is going to be. And then the conclusion and recommendation, right? And so these are, you can separate these, or they can be one section. I personally, if I were writing this, I would put them as one section. I don't know why there's a conclusion. I rhetorically have a hard time understanding it, because I feel like the recommendation to I understand the need for the conclusion as let me reiterate some things and give you some food for thought, but also here's my further recommendation, which is really what your reader's more interested in, is your ultimate recommendation. So if you have a conclusion section, I imagine it would be quite short, and then it's kind of like, well, why is this even here? So that's why I'm recommending, and I've recommended it to several people, to just join those sections together. I feel like it's rhetorically easier, but you do not have to. So whatever you do, you just need to make sure that if you have a separate conclusion section, that you're using that space in a way that is meaningful and not just fluff. And then, of course, you have your references page where you list your 6 sources. And just as a reminder, excuse me, just as a reminder, whatever sources are listed on your references page, you should be integrating at some point throughout your technical report. You need to be using those in your technical report. And that would go for any type of writing, unless you have a professor say specifically you can list these, but you don't have to address these. There's actually there's a special way to format a bibliography when you list references you've actually used in your writing versus references you looked at but didn't use. So there is a way to format that, but that's not what we're doing here. So the fact that you have 6 sources on your references page implies that you are actively and appropriately integrating evidence from those sources throughout your technical report. And when I say throughout, I mean from the introduction to the end of the conclusion and recommendation. If you have a section that has no evidence in it, you need to fix that, right? So evidence needs to be everywhere. It can be brief. Make sure you have your in-text citations. Anything that has numbers needs an in-text citation, that type of thing. Okay, so that's and I will put this, when I add this video to the announcement, I will just copy and paste this into the announcement as well. So if you don't watch the video, or you do and you want this, you will have it. So now I'm going to open up Kristen's draft. So many of you have been using APA 7th edition formatting. It makes me so excited. I am not judging those of you who are still using 6th edition because you can still use 6th edition. But I'm really excited to start seeing the 7th edition formatting. So Kristen has chosen to do the 7th edition formatting of APA. But again, Embry-Riddle is going to officially require APA 7 starting in August. But that's why I said in my announcements, I'm prepping for that. So all of the instruction I'm doing is on APA 7, which is why the videos that I created are on APA 7, but you are allowed to use APA 6. You do not get points off, or I do not, judge you for doing that because it's a choice that you can choose to make at this point. So Kristen's cover page looks really good. It has all the aspects for the APA 7 cover page. My only thing that I'm going to do for Kristen is she is missing uniform spacing. So I'm going to select everything in her document. You can see that everything is selected. Just as a reminder about uniform spacing, which is from my How to Set Up APA, the formatting video, is you want to go to this little icon up here to same on a PC and a Mac and open up that paragraph dialog box. And you can see that we want to go to this spacing section and we want the before and after to be at 0 and the line spacing to be at double. This is probably going to mix things up a little bit. Not too bad. And like I said in my previous video, you can always click on this I call it the paragraph icon. I was working in Pages earlier, and they how to see this is you have to choose something called Show Invisibles, and I was like, that's interesting. But anyways, it does show what's invisible, which is your formatting choices. So, just as a quick note, well, nope, that is because she's got this space up here. Just make that, you want at least 3 spaces there and 2 spaces between the title for the 7th page, cover page. So I'm just going to put 1 more space there. And she's got a page break, which I don't mess around with page breaks, but if you want to, be my guest. They always mess me up. Okay. I'm just making sure this is. And see, this is why I don't mess around with page breaks, because I don't know if you can see, but the header is quite large, and maybe I can fix that. Oops, I need to get out of there first. Let me make that smaller. This is where manual formatting becomes a lot of fun. What I was noticing is that the top of the abstract is not flush with the top of the margin here. And having the invisibles visible shows me that there is an extra item in the header. I don't know if it's 2 items or 1 item, but let's see if that. Nope, so I want to get rid of both of those. There we go. And that allows my abstract to be flush with the top margin. Okay. These are very minor notes, but they are things that I notice. And we'll recenter that. The other thing is, this is a weird thing in APA 6 or 7, but your abstract does not get any indentation, but the beginning of or not the beginning, but any paragraph in the actual body, those do get those 1/2 inch indentations. So the abstract doesn't, but everything else does. So in terms of Kristen's abstract, my major note here, I'm just going to hide the invisibles for a second because they're a little bit distracting. I can see here that she's got a, and she's using, I think the word, see, I never know because I never use those, I don't even know what it's called, like the words version of how to do, how to match up citations and the in-text citations with the citations on the reference page. So Kristen is writing about, her recipient is a bakery, and it's called Half Baked. And the tool or technology she's focusing on is this is kind of this is a new company, and she is looking at different commercial mixers that they should, and she's ultimately going to recommend the commercial mixer that they should invest in to make their products. So one of my notes for the abstract would be kind of what I was talking about earlier, which is what you want to stay away from those. I mean, you can have these broader ideas, right? So the broader idea here is this concept of the baking industry, which is important when you're recipient and, you're pretend working for a bakery, and you're doing this technical report. But before that, right, my concern is that Half Baked is not mentioned until down here. So because this technical report, the objective, right, the whole purpose of the report is to recommend a tool or technology to a hypothetical company, I would expect that to be kind of at the beginning, and then potentially bring in this information. And I would say, well, what's the, anytime anyone brings in evidence, it's always a matter of, is it necessary in the abstract to write that the baking industry in the U.S. provides a massive number of products to the consumer? That might be common knowledge. I don't think anybody would dispute that. I do like the reference of the American Bakers Association and this idea that, I like that second sentence more because it is more specific and it does speak to that bakery products is a $30 billion industry. But that might be information better put in the introduction than in the abstract. So, I mean, it could be used in the abstract, but it would have to be couched a little differently. Here is an example of a place where an in-text citation is needed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight this, and I'm going to insert a comment. And why can I never find insert comment? Let me just go to review. Here we go. Okay. And some of these, I can't remember everything I wrote on her draft in the speed grader, but some of this might be the same thing or redundant. But an in-text citation is needed because a number is given. So, and again, that goes back to what I said earlier, is anytime you use a number or statistics, an in-text citation needs to come after that sentence because you're pulling that number from somewhere. And then, right, and then she gets into the bakery itself. It's going to be a small bakery. And it's an interesting concept that I feel like could be optimized or operationalized a little bit better, because essentially there's a contrast here, and the contrast is really interesting, that it's a $30 billion industry, but 65% of bakeries are these small enterprises. So it's a really interesting contrast, but I'm having to infer that as the reader. It's not immediately known to me. It's kind of tucked away and hidden in there in the writing. So that could be something that is rewritten, right? That Half Baked is also going to be a small enterprise bakery. And then she gets to the purpose of this. So in order to maximize profit as well as capability, I might be more specific about what capability is. The different types of equipment will need to be reviewed. And equipment here could be more specific, right? Which is commercial mixers. And it's okay. I know sometimes students feel weird about being too repetitive. There is a line of where repetition is too much. And then but generally you want to be consistent. And I'll let you know if you're being too redundant or you're restating an idea or a type of writing style too often. Right, so this could be in order to maximize profit as well as capability. Again, capability a little bit vague. Or even, in order for Half Baked to be a successful bakery, it needs to appropriately invest in commercial mixers. This technical report analyzes. This is an example of editing for concision. You already have a verb here, so you don't need is going to. This report analyzes the different types of commercial mixers available for the small commercial bakery and makes a recommendation. So this is where the abstract needs to say what the recommendation is, just like you have to have that thesis in the introduction that says this is what the recommendation is. It also has to be in the abstract. Because again, the abstract is meant to be an overview of what is ultimately argued and being done in the technical report or whatever it is. This is that memo part that I'm pointing it out like none of you know what it is. You all know what it is. So it's to the owners of the bakery. It's from her. Subject is great, right? Analysis recommendation for mixing equipment purchase. Distribution list is great. Data is great, right? So memo part looks wonderful. Then she begins with the introduction. And I think most of mine, if I remember from my feedback to Kristen, most of my notes for her were about creating sections and subsections. So but let's look at the introduction first. So Half Baked is beginning to examine the market for the most appropriate equipment to purchase in preparation to open the bakery. In order to prevent purchasing the wrong equipment, which could delay the store's opening or sabotage its success, an analysis needs to be performed on the type of equipment to purchase. So this is where you as the writer of this report have to say, how much information about the company do I need to make known to the recipient, right? This is audience awareness. So I would probably recommend for Kristen here that a little bit more specificity could be given in terms of in preparation to open the bakery. So what timeline are we talking about? I'm sure the owners are aware of it, but reiterating that to the owners is helpful, right? And it also might be helpful, do we need to get these, how far in advance of the opening of the bakery do we need to purchase these mixers? Because I'm guessing we need to, I don't know what installation looks like. Do we need people to come in and set them up? Do we need to test them out and have some test batches? Like how much kind of trial and error needs to happen as well. So that's a little bit in terms of timeline. And I'm also kind of thinking ahead to the grant proposal project where you do have to specifically talk about a timeline. But that again might be specific to each one of you might have a different audience. Obviously, each one of you has a different readership. So the need for how specific you have to be about your company is going to be a little bit different. So this here, an analysis needs to be performed, is suggesting that this report is arguing for the fact that an analysis needs to be done when in fact that's what this report is doing. So I would probably change that wording just a little bit, just to be like, in order to prevent purchasing the wrong equipment, which could do these things, this report provides an analysis of equipment to purchase, right? And, in particular, commercial mixers. Right, and since there are several different types of equipment needed for a bakery, this analysis will only cover the types of mixers that are on the market and and this is another place and make a recommendation, just like the note I gave in the abstract. You here would want to put what is your ultimate recommendation, and that would make up that thesis statement. So the next section she uses is types of mixers, which I think is great, considering the tool technology that Kirsten has chosen. My main notes for her, because her sections are types of mixers, size of mixer required, the cost of mixers, and then she didn't quite, because she didn't have to do this, mixer reliability, and then recommendations. So what I recommended was really thinking about sections and subsections, mostly subsections, and also doing the great thing that we can do in technical writing that we can't do in academic writing, which is using bullet points, because it's all about being super concise and making the information as easily accessible to the readership as possible, to your readers. So, right, she says there are 3 different types of commercial mixers available for use in commercial bakeries. After that, I would just go ahead and it's essentially, if I remember correctly, there are 3 different lists in this paragraph. There is the list of, and I'm going to highlight this. I'm going to go, there's this list of what the mixers are, the planetary, spiral, and vertical. There's a list of bowl sizes. I'm going to make that a different color. And then there's the list of the volume of the mixer that determines the style of mixer. At least as a reader, that's what I'm reading, is that there are 3 different major things discussed in this paragraph, and each are comprised of different lists, right? So there are 3 different types of commercial mixers available for use in commercial bakeries. These mixers are these things. Each type has advantages and disadvantages, which she gets to later when she talks about the specific mixers. Each type of mixer has various bowl sizes, and then she lists those. And then the volume of the mixer determines the style of the mixer. So mixer size, blah, blah, blah. And then she gives, the numbers, 10 to 24, 8 quarts, 10 to 24 quarts, and then 20 to 80 quarts. And I would just say for consistency's sake, using that hyphen the same time. So this is potentially a place where, this is kind of an introduction, but I'm just thinking of revision off the top of my head, but I might recommend something along the lines of, there are 3 specific things to consider, or 3 major facets of commercial mixers to consider when purchasing for commercial bakeries. And I'm wondering if Half Baked is a commercial. I mean, it is a commercial bakery. It's just a small commercial bakery. And then having, right, the bullet points of, types of mixers. And then I would have planetary, spiral, vertical cutters. I would say there are 3 major when purchasing mixers available for use for commercial bakeries. And then, of course, we would do that. And then the next one is bowl sizes. All right, so we would go back. We don't need this because that's talked about later. Wouldn't need that. Countertop mixers, bench mixers, floor mixers, and then okay. So that would be one way to do that. And is to be so to take out that narrative, and that would just to see how that makes it easier for the reader. And then from here, I would offer a subsection, right? So I would first talk about planetary mixers, and then go into that, and then have a section on spiral mixers, and so on and so forth, and then do one for the vertical cutter mixers. But this allows the reader to understand, like, okay, this section here, right, instead of having all of these paragraphs one after the next, you are allowing the reader to understand in very kind of short snippets what's being talked about, right? Okay, I could read about planetary mixes here, spiral mixes here, especially if somebody has read through the report and they want to reread through the report. They won't have to like hunt really hard to be able to find those section or subsection headers and know exactly where to look. And then this is a place where I would say, if you're talking about the advantages or disadvantages of mixers, I probably want to add just a brief evidence here of like, what's the major advantage of the planetary mixer, right? What's the major advantage of the spiral mixer? What's the major advantage of the vertical mixer? And so on and so forth. So the size of the mixer, same thing. So now she's talking about, how much dough that needs to be considered, and this is perfect. So now my main question is, where are these numbers coming from? I don't know if, for example, say you're opening a bakery and you're like, I expect to, or what is the general output of product from a small bakery? And you want to be on par with that. So it might be worth, if the research is out there, to bring in information that shows this is what generally a small bakery sells on a daily basis, per day. So on a daily basis, bread, donuts, pastries, and then 2 cakes per day, right? So, and then the average weight for each individual product, right? And so what Kristen's doing now is doing some math to figure out how many pounds of product we need, right? So she estimates that, which is great, and then offers this wonderful table, which, provides goes back to that concept of the maximum bowl capacity. So the size of the mixer required. The only thing I would recommend adding here is, what am I supposed to take away? So as somebody because understand that the owners of, and I don't know, but because again, this is a hypothetical bakery, but an owner of a bakery might not be a baker. They might just be this might be an investment of theirs, right? So, or they might be bakers and they might have more information about this, or they might not have the knowledge of what it takes to be a commercial bakery. So ultimately, what am I supposed to take away from this? Like, I understand that I'm being told that 170 pounds of product will need to be made each day. But then what does this tell me about the type of mixer that I need? So I think a little bit more of kind of like a takeaway, like after this chart or this table, you know, based on what Half Baked expects to sell, it would seem that blah, 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 right? So that kind of discussion is missing ultimately in terms of like, I understand what you're saying as the reader, but again, what it gets into what we call the so what. Okay, you're telling me this information. So what? What do I need to know ultimately about bowl capacity and the fact that my bakery is, you know, needs 170 pounds of product each day. Next section is cost of mixers, which is perfect. My eye always scans for evidence. So my first question would be, where's the integrated evidence? So that would be something that I would request Kristen to add here, is cost of mixers. She even says that, right? Like, this is the research that I did, but that information is not provided. Like, I don't think there's any specific prices given, right? There's information about the least expensive and the most expensive, but as the owner, what kind of cost are we talking about? And also, how many mixers do we need based on that 170 pound of product per day estimation? So those are the kind of that's that information that is needed in that cost. And it's not only just type of mixer, but also, and not only how much that mixer costs, but how many mixers are we going to need? Are we going to need multiple mixers? And that type of thing. So that would be added there. Mixer reliability. I think after cost, it feels more natural to go into recommendations. So I feel like mixer reliability should go in a different area. It might go under, like, that might be information that is added to when you actually talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of the mixers. So the you know, how reliable is a planetary versus spiral versus the vertical cutter. So that evidence and research could go into this section of the technical report. And then after that, right, because then that organization makes a little bit more logical sense as the reader, right, because you have the introduction, you have a general discussion of kind of what needs to be discussed in terms of mixers. Then you go into the advantages and the disadvantages of each mixer, and then the size of the mixer, right, which is in need of some more specific information that feeds into the concept, or not the concept, but it feeds into the discussion of cost. And then from there you make, you know, your conclusion and recommendations, and then followed by the references page. So I don't want to make this video super long, but I did want to provide, especially since you guys only have a few days to revise, but I did want to offer kind of a conversation about, you know, what I'm actually looking at when I'm looking at the technical reports, things to consider when you're revising these, in addition to some of the feedback that I've already provided, and noting that not everybody's sections are going to be the same, but it does make a lot of sense in my head for cost to then be followed by conclusion and recommendations. Because by that point in the writing, your reader should have a good idea of already all of the different things you've talked about. Okay, you've given a conversation of these things. What's it going to cost? What do you recommend based on the cost? Right, so even though this might be the most expensive and the best one, maybe we can only afford, if you're recommending that we need X number of mixers, if we need 3 mixers to produce the amount of product that we want to produce every day, then maybe that forces us to go with the cheapest. But then we have to think about, right, well, maybe we want to invest in the most expensive ones because that goes into, it'll last longer potentially. And so there's those different recommendations that the owners of Half-Baked might need. And I'm reading all of these as I am the owners. I am the owner, the CEO, or the president, or whoever. That's me as your reader. So that's how I'm trying to read like that as a way to give feedback. Like, what's the type of information I need to know? I need to know it more quickly. I need this to be to look prettier so I can read it quicker because I'm busy and short-term memory is like 7 seconds long. Okay, so I will also, like I said before, I will post this information that I talked about earlier in the announcement that I provide this video. Other than that, good luck on revising. I really look forward to reading final drafts of the technical report. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Bye-bye.